Good morning. Welcome to the start of the second day. My name is Arno Kaptein. I'm from the Netherlands, and most of the time I make a living selling my services as a management consultant for governance and management systems, and then mostly those for the management of information and technology. So that could be for the purposes of risk, for security, any line of topics. Now, so I've been working with PCB on and off for the last 10 years or something. So when they called me and asked me whether I would be interested to act as the moderator for one of the panel discussions, I figured, well, yeah, I know something about Internet of Things, so I could probably do a speech about that. So, all well and said. And then yesterday morning, somebody said, but hold on, Arno, all right? You're supposed to be the moderator, right? You're not supposed to be the guy talking, you're just supposed to be the guy asking the questions, right? The real interesting people, the guys who actually got the answers and the knowledge, are the ones behind the table. So, without further ado, let me ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Now, one thing, you see the name of David Lanoy on the screen. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. So, Joe, be my guest. Introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Jo Dalton. I work for a company called Pentest Partners. We're engaged in providing penetration testing services, forensics, compliance, and have done significant research on IoT devices, looking at the automotive sector, connected dolls. The iKettle was quite an interesting piece of research, right through to the Mitsubishi Outlander that we compromised a couple of years ago. So, yeah.
Okay.
Hello, good morning. My name is Roland Scherb. I'm CEO of the Paribas consulting company based in Munich, Germany. We are a company which are serving services regarding standards, auditing, training, and on the other hand, we are developing software, especially for the field of quality management, like remote audit solutions. Therefore, we connect each devices, also smart glasses like this with augmented reality. And this is from our point also a kind of interesting thing regarding IoT.
Hi, my name is Zahra. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Firmalizer, which stands for Firmware Analyzer. And for those of you who doesn't know what firmware is, it's the whole software stack of these devices. And we do the analysis based on this approach. So we provide services for device manufacturers, corporate users to do this risk assessment on their devices. And also we are in contact with policymakers and also standardization bodies to provide feedback from our customers and also ourselves as a cybersecurity company to provide their standards, best practices as well.
Hello, my name is Holger Schrader. I'm a senior consultant for information security and information risk. I'm a co-founder of Enfina Security, which is located in the Czech Republic, nearby Prague. And I'm a member of the ISACA Germany chapter, working group information security, and I'm also an auditor for ISO 27001.
Here we go. Now, Holger kicked it off already nicely. Okay, so where we're here for Internet of Things, risk and security issues thereof. Now, interestingly enough, yesterday afternoon we kind of met up and we ended up in a fierce debate, right? I will promise you one thing, right? The outcome of that debate is that you will not get any ready-made answers, right? Because the five of us and a number of these topics, right, we couldn't really agree. That's the nature of the beast. But, we will have some insights and hopefully we will send you home with some food for thought, right, so that you can take it forward. I have no idea about the level of your knowledge about IoT and the security thereof. We probably have a mix of people, right? So what we want to do is really go through these four topics. Yeah, IoT, what is it? Then second thing is, IoT, why is it special? Like Holger said, why can't we just do the information security and leave it at that. If it is not the same, so how should we approach it? And lastly, okay, what are the possible ways of organizing that within an organization? Now, there are fiercely different views on these topics amongst the panelists, and amongst myself, actually. So, first of all, by the way, we would very much like to make this an open discussion, right? So, we will kick it off, and I will basically keep poking at them to give me some answers, right? But if you have an opinion, if you have a question, please step in. The one thing is, we only have basically 55 minutes left, 4 topics to go, so I might need to cut certain discussions short. Having said all that, IoT, what is it? Roland, are you?
Yeah, IoT, Internet of Things. It could be everything or nothing, because do you remember probably to Skynet, Terminator? An asset and device connected with another device. Right now, I checked open Bluetooth connection in this room. I stopped at over 20 devices. So, a device, it's connected to another one. It's connected by a digital way to the internet. And then, of course, maybe we can discuss what else. An IP address, and services, and cloud. We expect any reply from this kind of service. So this could be, from my point of view, IoT.
Anybody else give me a bit more of an outline of what they feel IoT is, or maybe what it's not, right? I've been working in this field as well, right? One of the organizations I've worked with in the past basically said, if it's got an IP address, then it's IoT. Any of you care to comment? Joe, I saw her nodding and I knew she would do that because that's what she did to me yesterday. So, take it away.
Well, just because something's got an IP address doesn't necessarily make it an IoT device. We have internal networks and enterprise devices that have IP addresses that will never actually see the light of day and won't connect to the internet. So ultimately, we can't consider those to be an IoT device.
Do I hear you correctly that to be an IoT device, it has to be connected to the internet?
No.
Okay. Somebody else who wants to explain to me why that is not a correct assumption either. Sarah?
Well, I usually have this discussion even with our customers because there are definitely different comprehension in IoT, but whenever, you connect an embedded devices to a network, it doesn't need to be an internet, but of course a network, it's called IoT. If it's not completely connected, completely separated, then it's actually an embedded device, not an IoT device, because it's not connected everywhere. But even some people limited this definition and they say, no, IoT ecosystem is just something like a sensor which is connected to a gateway and that's connected to a cloud. In my opinion, it's just part of the definition. And of course, I can tell you there have been different comprehension and definition, and even based on that, different statistics. But, the way we defined it, let's say, is like that. But of course, again, different comprehensions.
Yeah, Sarah, you mentioned connected. Let's dive into the term connected. I've got a lot of devices behind my firewall that are connected to my intranet. And since my intranet through the firewall is indirectly connected to the internet, doesn't that now make all of these devices IoT devices?
Definitely.
Yes? Okay, I know that's... Who was it again that yesterday made the fierce point that it wasn't? Was that you, Joe? Right, okay, let's take it away.
Well, that becomes reliant ultimately on your firewall. If there are conflicts within the rules or the configuration, just because
bloody hell, you must...
It doesn't make it particularly...
You must be a consultant as well, right? It depends. That doesn't help me any.
Well, that was the issue yesterday. When you're debating IoT security and where it sits within the infrastructure, that can become a challenge, but that falls down to actually understanding the landscape of where your device is sitting, how it's connecting, what it is doing. For me, an IoT device actually does something.
Okay, so basically we come to the conclusion that we haven't got a clue what IoT actually is. Is that correct? There is no universal definition.
There's a very broad definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all four of you use a different definition.
That's right.
If I start drilling down in it, now this is the first point that we made out yesterday, right? We all understand that there's this thing called IoT, but if you start drilling down, you know, what is the line? Is it this? Does it end here? And that's not? So the moral of the story is, if you're working in the field of IoT and coming up with solutions, the very first thing I think you need to do is get a workable definition for the organization that you're working with and get everybody on the same page of what it is there for them. And that can be due to their special circumstances, that they might deviate from the generally accepted one. Anybody want to comment on that perception?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody got any questions about that? Okay, let's go to the next one. IT security. Like Holger was already saying, him being a dinosaur, he's probably started in IT security. He probably heard about information security, right? That's a quite novel concept. And information security, information risk management, as we tend to call it these days, right? We focus on three things: the information and the risk of confidentiality, integrity, and availability thereof. So, who wants to explain to me how that is fit for purpose or unfit for purpose in the nature of IoT devices? Holger.
So, first of all, there's no need for change. In the discussion about information security, in the ISO 27001, as well in the risk management part of the 27005, you always start information-centric. So everything what you do, you put the information in the middle, and from there you look at processes, you look at the systems holding or supporting this information, and that is what it was the last 10, 15 years. And it worked fine so far as we are in the world of information technology. So if it comes now to operation technologies, and we are looking for an approach that handles both information technology as well as operation technology, we have to take into consideration, that is something that really opened my mind yesterday by the discussion we had, that there are also assets which are not related to information. Yesterday we talked about Stuxnet. Stuxnet attacked the Iran nuclear plants. These, English word for centrifuge.
Centrifuges. Yeah.
Okay. And from that point of view, no information was involved. Maybe the configuration. If you put in a configuration file, then you can go information-centric, but it's more or less a workaround. So what was an eye-opener for me yesterday was that if you go information-centric, you miss out assets, technologies, which are not directly related to information. So if I said there's no need for change, maybe there's a little adoption needed in the way we see the risk identification. So I don't want to take the third topic now, but we will see that maybe C, I, and A is not enough.
Now, can I ask the people in the audience for some views, if they have any questions, if they understand what it is that we're actually saying, right? And, oh, well, somebody's nodding, so that's good. Actually, yesterday afternoon, we didn't. We couldn't see eye to eye on the whole topic. Yeah? But anybody has got any questions about this? Do you understand what it is that we're trying to say? IoT, right? What we're now talking about, right? It used to be IT, information technology, right? If you look at a model like COBIT, in COBIT 5, it said that it was a framework for governance and management of information and related technology, right? So the technology aspect was only considered relevant in the context of information, right? Now, there's a lot of technology out there that doesn't have the primary purpose of handling information, IT. That technology we tend to grasp as OT, operational technology. Now, operational technology is digitizing on a very fast way as well. Yeah? So it's becoming digital. It becomes subject to the same problems, the same cyber risk, and the same risk towards cyber that we already knew from IT. So organizations like Gartner have been calling for the IoT-OT alignment for years. Now, what you will find is that a lot of these, what we now consider OT devices, actually are digitized versions of what used to be OT items. Yes?
IoT, it's for me, from my point of view, a challenge because you have to think a little bit one step forward because right now we discussed it's a connection to the internet, connection different devices. But now if you think we have also to define information and data, what will happen? Because if you think we have behind an artificial intelligence system, a self-learning system, what will happen then? Based on who and which data we have then and what will happen afterwards. And I think this is also a challenge regarding IoT. Which device is connected to the next one? What will happen with our data? For instance, maybe you use a watch which measure your blood pressure. What will happen with this kind of data? Or think to smart houses, smart factories, something like this. What will happen? Do a thief know if you are at home or not, because I was able to check your TV or your refrigerator or what else. So this is the thing regarding IoT. Everything is connected to another device.
And thus, if it starts going haywire, right, if you lose control over those assets, right, the impact of what happens might be its own risk. Right? So the assumption used to be, like, okay, we focus on information because actually the asset itself is not as valuable. Compared to the value of the information, corporate information running through these IT systems, you know, hey, if we burn out a computer, fine, we get a new one. That is, in the bigger scheme of things, you know, those things weren't really mattering that much. Now that we're talking about, indeed, organizations or refineries or other assets, right? If we lose control over these assets, right, it's no longer just about the information. Stuxnet showed us that you can take down a whole plant, right? We already discovered the first botnet made up out of IoT devices, right? So loss of control on its own account, right? And these IoT devices that made up these botnets, basically that can be your Nest room temperature measurement. The information running through there is of no particular interest, right? You can really do that. It's the item itself and what the hacker can do with it and misuse it if he breaks in and controls it. Now that basically means that we got a whole new scheme of risks on our plate as IoT. Or at least that's how I would call it, right? Back to the panel. Any closing arguments or?
Yeah, actually, well, first of all, I usually disagree when you separate IT and OT and, try to bring different definition for IoT, because based on even what we defined, IoT goes into, both sectors, in my opinion. For example, when we talk about devices are in both environments, actually. You can talk about cameras, you can talk about printers, you can talk about sensors, you can talk about PLCs and anything which is connected to network, and it can be any types of the network, and also it can be also a cloud platform. And when we discuss about this security, then in this area, well, we can talk about the differences that IoT has with the, let's say, legacy platforms. And some of them, some of the devices even are legacy devices. And the thing is that usually there are some differences in the asset management. For example, some of the devices don't have any even, ID to be able to be detected, or they cannot be really, those IoT assets cannot be really controlled because they even don't have any, centralized management. They're, they have heterogeneous ownership and lots of challenges. Even they cannot be controlled easily. And the other thing, in addition to asset management, is vulnerability management. So they can also have different kinds of vulnerabilities, and even finding their vulnerabilities would be harder. For example, in a very simple, let's say, laptop or PC, you can easily install an anti-malware and find some issues. Or, for example, use some vulnerability assessment products and install their agents and find them. But on IoT devices, because they have very specific operating systems and sometimes they're bare metal, you cannot really install any agents, and finding vulnerabilities on them is pretty different. And even the current vulnerability assessment products cannot find all of the risks on these kinds of devices. So you need to take a different approach to find the vulnerabilities on them. And the other part is for monitoring and management of these devices. Again, as I mentioned, because these devices are different OSs, different systems, very, very vast mature. So you cannot really centrally manage these kinds of devices or control them, and even lots of them are not connected to your network. Imagine, for example, let's say an environment, for example, employees use some wearable devices which is connected over 4G network. Even it's not connected over a local network. How do you manage those devices? So pretty different devices, different ways to identify those vulnerabilities, and different ways to manage and monitor them. And this way you need to find, the solution to find the, issues and address these kinds of challenges. And these are just, the challenges regarding the device security, the IoT security. There is also data privacy as well, the data which is passed through these devices, which should be monitored, which should be managed. And this is also users' privacy, because you even don't have, let's say, any kind of platform or anything that, asks user regarding their consent that, for example, this IoT device is gathering your data. How can you provide it for the user? So, in my opinion, these are the main security challenges, and which are different from the current challenges, from the current ecosystem, and we should look for this. So there are already some solutions out there, but we should work on the other solutions to address these kinds of challenges.
I think that, once again, basically what the bottom line of our answer is, yes, it's different. And for the rest, it depends. Ask us over, and we'll help you figure it out in your specific case, right? By all means, once again, the answer, and I think that that's the consensus, right? Please be aware that an IoT device is not just a special form of IT device. This is a different game with different specifications, with different tools at our hands, right? But also from the top down with a different set of risks. You need to look at it. Now, any last minute questions or comments from our panel? Yes, yes.
So when we're looking at IoT security, completely agree with lots of things that my colleagues on the panel have said. For me, one of the significant risks with IoT is the complexity of the supply chain. You will generally have somebody, you will purchase hardware chipsets from one particular organisation, somebody else will develop the mobile application, somebody else will manage or maintain the infrastructure. And the challenge with IoT, unfortunately, is there is no regulation. Certainly for consumer devices, there's no mandate for any security to be embedded into these devices. Consumers are left at risk. There's no laws that are actually protecting us. Those devices that are then rolled out into an enterprise environment are required to have an element of security. But when you start to go through the chain, as you said, you can look at the software, you can look at the applications that support that, but then you need to deconstruct the actual hardware itself. A lot of the time, an IoT device can actually be given to an individual, which means an attacker, a malicious individual, has the capability of taking that apart to identify the vulnerabilities that could then lead to a compromise of millions of devices. And the challenge that I find is ultimately trust within that supply chain and transparency. So understand it, are people ultimately sharing that information? You can create a framework to assess the device, but if the chipset manufacturer, the hardware manufacturer isn't fully disclosing the potential weaknesses with their solution, then you can be come unstuck.
Yep. That basically makes 2 points, right? First one being like, okay, we are just getting towards the edge about regulatory arrangements to make sure that people think about what they're offering. That's one. And two, that quite frankly, a lot of these manufacturers come from a completely different realm and haven't ever been able to understand the whole concept of cybersecurity. Right? If you got this remote baby phone that's got an open connection to the internet, so that if you're up with the neighbors, that you can see whether your kid is actually sleeping or not, right? That's an open connection to the internet. If then you look at a thing like that, and the provider and the builder hasn't even built in basic capabilities of setting a password, right? And you go like, what the heck is happening here? How can we allow that type of things to hit the market? Isn't the regulator, isn't the law paying attention? Are the developers not paying attention? Right? So yeah, we are, and that is partially because it's all so new. Right?
And at the end, who is liable for it? Sorry? Who is liable for it? So if we
No,
talk about the baby phone, or yesterday we had the example of self-driving cars and updates over the air. So if there's a new software update and going out to all Mercedes S-Class in the world, or maybe geographically, we start somewhere where it's not so harmful, US. And later on we go to the other areas.
Yesterday we indeed had a very interesting discussion, right? Let's take it to the room and let's see what the room thinks, right? Okay, we had the following hypothetical question, right? Self-driving cars, and trust me, we're very close to them, right? The current electric cars basically have that ability. Now, assume that in 2 years from now, all right, you're sitting there and you decide that it's about, and you're coming from the Netherlands, Germany, right? And you decided to leave your car at home. Now you basically say, okay, you know, I probably missed my train. You know what? I got a couple of hours. Let the car come and pick me up. All right? So you push the button, and from somewhere in, I don't know, it starts driving toward you. You're not in the car. You're not even close. Whatever. The car gets into an accident. It's clearly that the car is fault. Who's liable? Can I see some hands that would hold that actually the car owner, whether he's in the car or not, should be liable? 1, 2, 3. Yes? The manufacturer, right? They now dig into this thing and they find there is a logic flaw in the software, right? Thereby, the car made a wrong decision and slammed into something and gave a gas, right? Still, in this case, is it still the owner of the car, or is it now the manufacturer? How many people would say, hold on, we're crossing a line here, right? Now let's go for the manufacturer. On the panel, how many of you said, okay, let's go for the manufacturer?
Well, me.
Joe? She was fierce yesterday, right? She wants to go for the manufacturer all the way.
No, of course, it's manufacturer.
Yeah.
In that case, I think the owner is still responsible.
Yeah.
However, he or she should take the software developer as a liable person.
Okay.
At the end, the owner is always responsible.
I think maybe a parallel could be in the pharmaceutical industry. I buy pills from the pharmacy, which are supposed to have been validated and put on the market, but then I get a side effect from them. I bought them with the knowledge that they've been checked, so I took the responsibility to trust the company which put them out. So I can't say, you should have told me not to buy them.
So now, basically what we're talking about is as long as we build in assurances that the manufacturer takes due precautions, such as pharmaceuticals, right? We basically say, well, we can't predict 100% whether bad stuff won't happen, but as long as we manage that risk and test to an acceptable level, right? Is that the way forward? Just start entering regulation and basically make these guys test until the remaining risk is to an acceptable level?
I'm working a lot with the insurance industry. In insurance industry, that's why, for example, the car manufacturers at this point, even if they develop self-driving systems, the driver has to keep the hand on the wheel. And this is mandatory. The system automatically shuts down if it doesn't detect the driver. That's why, by example, I mean, the people which were filmed in the United States driving Tesla and sleeping on the wheel, actually they use a small hack, such as putting a bottle of water on the steering wheel. But the idea is that the insurers had absolutely the same question. Who is liable in case of an accident? Is it the car, is it the manufacturer, or is it the driver? So in order to transfer all the liability to the driver, they are mandating that the driver should keep the hand on the wheel, thus making the driver responsible, even if the driver doesn't do actually nothing. Thanks.
But frankly, forward-looking, that statement won't hold, right? Within 10 years, we will have the ability to get that car to drive from Amsterdam and pick me up here. It's going to happen, right? I had a session with the Dutch Roadworks, and they are preparing for that, right? So making people basically dismantling self-driving, we can do that for now. Yeah.
So I'm American, I'm a lawyer, and I own a Tesla. And that Tesla was just updated this week, so you can summon it in a parking lot, and it can drive and come and pick you up in front of the store. You're only supposed to do this on private property, because if you're on a public road, it's still not permitted by law. But if you're on private property, any parking lot, think of a large shopping area parking lot, well then the law doesn't necessarily apply. But in America, in law, we have only one rule, and that is follow the money. So of course the manufacturer is always liable, because who has more money, the owner or the manufacturer? It's a strict liability issue, and you're going to go for where there's the most money.
That is an interesting spin on the whole thing, right?
Roland?
Okay.
I think we have something like shared responsibility. So it's the same situation what we have today. So whenever I go into a car and drive a car, I'm responsible as a driver that the car is in perfect situation. When I drive on the street, the owner of the street or the provider of the street is responsible that the street is in perfect order. And when I buy the car or use the car, so I have to rely on the producer that this what he put into the car is in a perfect situation. So in the future, nothing will change. We have just to look, not to follow the money, but to follow the responsibility.
Okay, well, I think that we more or less need to cut this discussion short because we've got a couple of other topics. I hope that you're taking away from this one that this is a pretty complex issue. Right? And with the ongoing development of IoT and other developments, right, this is not getting any easier. And the answers that we got now are, hey, just don't make it not self-driving, right? If we even have the assumption that that car has been driven on public roads, then we're okay because now it's clear who's accountable, right? If you're supposed to have your hand on the wheel and fall asleep, then you're still accountable, right? But basically what you're saying is you're supposed to be the driver. Now, you're supposed to be in control. And there we go, and now we come back to our last bit, loss of control, right? The risk that we identified under as one of the new risks coming up with IoT, right? So the loss of control is what it comes back to. I would hope. Anybody, any closing suggestions? Short, please, because...
Yeah, of course. So because, I mean, Joe said very great thing regarding supply chain security. And the thing is that all of these devices, whether from a car or anything, consist of lots of components which come from, you know, different brands, different companies, and different, you know, sectors. So definitely when manufacturer is trying to get all of those components should, you know, perform all of the supply chain security assessments, even service level agreement regarding, you know, the security of those devices. When, because usually those cars have some form of SIM cards there which is controlled, for example, you know, do over-the-air update or anything. So especially after 5G, these, you know, service level interaction will be much more, so even the operator would be somehow liable regarding these kinds of security. And also, you know, the driver, I think, is the less liable person. Of course, there are shared responsibilities. I agree with that, definitely. But the level of responsibilities are pretty different. And of course, you know, we need to exactly try to separate these things, identify which part comes from which party, and, you know, what was the exact problematic party whenever something happens. So then, you know, find the producers, find a vendor for that, and find someone who was responsible for that, and then make that person liable. But in my opinion, the most liable party will be the manufacturer, because they are gathering different kinds of stuff and trying to, you know, serve the users. And of course, at the next level will be the operator. But another point is that, well, in EU we have Cybersecurity Act, which became a regulation about 2 months ago, and one of the reasons for that was for insecure IoT devices. Of course, it's for all of the ICT products, processes, and services. And based on that, they defined different goals for all of these stuff, all of these products, processes, and services. And based on that, then organizations like ENISA and the other parties would be responsible for defining different schemes for that. And for example, for IoT, ENISA is trying to defining different schemes for IoT security, and then based on that, working on certifications and regulations. But again, the problem is that for the time being, they just mention it as voluntarily, otherwise in the future they change it. So again, there is not that much regulation, so yeah, we need to...
Okay, yep. And on that note, I'd like to take it to the next question. And so how do we approach this whole thing of risk management, risk and security management of IoT devices? Can we take our current management systems and just scale them to cover IoT? And as an example, I'm currently working with one of the bigger organizations worldwide. Right? And I'm being first to help them redesign their information risk management system globally. And basically what we did, we said, well, you know, we're going to take it from the top, and in line with the change from ISACA, who, as we identified earlier, went from information and related technology into a framework for the governance and management of information and technology in 2019, all basically stating all technology. We figured, okay, so we're going to now approach this from that stance, right? We're going to create one approach that covers all our information and technology assets. Then somebody will, hold on. You know, the truck, analog as it is, that would be considered a digital asset or a technology asset as well, right? So are you now going to take maintenance for maintaining the trucks and everything else? So then we stepped back and said, okay, let's just put a caveat on there. So now we are designing the worldwide global system for the governance and management of all digital information and technology. Now, I asked this question yesterday, and that gave a very, very nice debate. Who of you thinks that that is the most foolish approach you ever heard about addressing this type of thing? Anybody? Or would you agree? Do you think that it will hold water? And then it went dead silent. Joe, you always have an
I'm getting
opinion.
picked on today. I think, yeah, I mean, there's various frameworks that are available. I think the challenge is there's no global standardization that we can easily work towards. Organizations that are developing hardware over in China have a very different concept regarding risk, and have a very different appetite for risk versus some of my clients in the UK. It can be a significant challenge when you look at how that's developed and some of the embedded routes to access, shall we say. I won't call it a backdoor, they don't like that term in China. But it's embedded within the chipsets, and these are then being rolled out. Now, unless you've actually gone and done the end-to-end testing, as I've talked about previously, you have to look at everything within the device. So for me, frameworks are good, but until you actually validate it, physically looking at the technology and understanding the vulnerabilities that you're presenting to yourself, it can be an issue because you have operational requirements, you've got requirements for organisations that manufacture cybersecurity. So there's a whole landscape to take into account. So
you're basically, can I combine that to the word skeptic?
Yes.
Okay.
I really don't feel, even from the ISO standards, COBIT, I don't think there's a cohesive standard that actually does fully apply.
Okay, fair enough.
Analyzes, maybe slightly, but risk treatment, it stays the same as it was before.
So basically what you're saying is that on a higher level, right, technology might be different, but the things that we need to do is exactly the same.
Yeah, because we are always looking for security objectives.
She's nodding now. She didn't do that yesterday. we might have made some headway. Okay, Roland, your view on the whole thing.
Yeah, regarding risks, I think it's also quite important which kind of value we have. So from my point of view, it could be also happens that we have a kind of value-driven risk minimizing, because if the value much more, we like it. So maybe I have a different opinion regarding the risk.
Yep.
Yeah, this value-driven thing in most of the common standards always, as we talked before, is information-centric. So the value is given by the information, loss of information due to CI&A.
Right. So if we were to change that basic assumption, right, not just look at CIA, but start looking at the broader spectrum, would that help?
Yeah. So I don't want to bring up your idea.
By all means. Hey, I'm the moderator. I'm not supposed to bring up IDs, so please do on my behalf.
Okay. So yesterday we had the idea, beside the information classified to confidentiality, integrity, availability, also to create a new term, CIAL, for loss of control, which is then related to the asset, independent from its information asset, so that also a technology asset can be rated without information. So as an idea to come away from IT, OT differentiation and say this applies to IT as well as to OT and Internet of Things and holistic, worldwide, every digital asset.
Zara, I've seen you look in front of you. I heard you made a statement like, okay, the nature of the beast of IoT is so different. You know, we can't use the same standard tools, and so it's so completely different. Would that involve you stating that we can't have a standardized approach on this thing end to end, or?
Well, in terms of I mean, when you try to, it's actually depends on how you look at it. When you have a very, very top-down approach and try to look at it in the very holistic way, yeah, we need to protect confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But how? I mean, when we go into the how, it is pretty different, and even what we need to protect. Because, as I mentioned, there are different ecosystems in the IoT, and which are pretty different with the other parts. I mean, in some sectors they are the same, but in some areas they are pretty different. And to be honest, even the current approaches couldn't address lots of issues. For example, in terms of supply chain security, what is the a comprehensive solution to address the whole supply chain security? So in my opinion, the current approaches even couldn't address everything completely. So in any case, we need to look at it in a very different way to be able to address the other kinds of things as well. But of course, if we look at some standards and best practices in this area, usually the stuff I saw so far are published by different parties. For example, in industrial sectors, IEC 62443-4-2 was released at the, IEC 62443-4-2, which was released at the, I think in February, the end of February this year. It's for, embedded and IoT devices in the industrial sector. Then GSMA published another IoT security practices, but for telecom sector. Then we have IoT Security Foundation try to get holistic approach. Then we have ETSI, which tries to copy all of these documents and publish another one. Then we have UK Code of Practice and the other kinds of stuff and everything. And they are all trying to say the same thing, maybe in different ways, and sometimes they even use their best practices of each other. But sometimes our feedback to them is that you are not in contact with the manufacturers, you are not in the contact with the users. Lots of the things you suggested in here, even the technology for it is not ready. So if we go down into the details of what they provide, I think they need to be more, let's say, realistic, more practical, and try to understand these, the details of the nature of these things and understand the current technology to be able to come with the right practices.
Okay. Can I basically grasp it, and please correct me if I heard incorrectly, right? From a top-down governance, holistic thing, there might be a standardized approach. But there where the feet hit the ground, right, you need to go specific based on what it is that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So basically using a umbrella framework such as COVID 2019 to basically outline the whole thing, right? And then there comes this point where you basically need to say, right, okay, so change management is one of the topics. Now, change management for IoT or change management testing for IoT is fundamentally different from the way that I do it in old-fashioned IT systems. So therefore, if I want to make it work for this particular technology, there I need to enhance and add whatever is available, if available, right, to that mix and underpin and detail out under, which is exactly what's happening with us as well, right? Any last minute comments on that note? Yes?
I confess I may be a little bit like Holger, and maybe I will come across as a dinosaur in my first comment, which is...
You are not a dinosaur at all.
Well, if I just make the comment, perhaps you might rephrase that, which is, a couple of years ago, I heard my son shout out, Alexa, stop. And I thought, who is Alexa? What is she doing in my son's room? Now, from that point of view, I thought, I need to know what is Alexa. So looking through all these questions, who is Alexa? What is she? And going with Zara, you made the comment about components and everything. I try to learn and become educated. I still don't think I fully understand what are these component parts with the echo he's got and the voices and everything. But now coming to the question about how do we approach risk management, my question is that we are now, and I'm trying to bring it down to an everyday level. That's, we can talk about the cars and the self-driving, but there are lots of concepts that lots of us are unaware of what's been decided. But if we bring it down to just everyday level, we're in the process of renovating our daughter's house. And the sort of questions that we don't know how to address is, in the past, if we wanted to protect our home from being burgled, we would put an alarm system in. Mm-hmm. The alarm manufacturer would come, he would have the expertise, he would say where things needed to be, and we would actually feel comfortable with the fact that if the alarm went off, it's going to go to the central place, wherever the alarm people were, it would dial something to our phone, and we would put in a code. Now what happens is, we're being faced with, well, do you want to have a Nest video doorbell? And do you want to have a Nest thermostat? And by the way, do you want to actually have this, underfloor heating? And there are all these smart things that people are asking us about. And I actually, in my simple view, said, oh, no, we want to keep life simple. And my children's view is, oh, no, we want to have this. So in the approach to risk management, do we keep life simple, or do we want the extra functionality of being able to adapt the heating from our phone? So I apologize for a fairly long question, but it's meant to be a simple question. What is the approach?
I think that's a very great question, actually, because there are two things. Yeah, first of all, I think that the best thing and the best solution to be simple and not to use anything. And I mean, what's the requirement of Alexa in your room? What happens to you if it's not there, to be honest? I mean, there are lots of things that we use because they are fashionable and we like them, but we are as a company who is in direct contact with those manufacturers, and my feedback to you is that they really don't care because there is no regulation, nothing enforces them. We have reported lots of vulnerabilities to these kinds of manufacturers, and even they didn't fix it. And I'm not talking about an unknown Chinese manufacturers, even I'm talking about the big companies, even American companies, European companies like Cisco, like, for example, even Amazon and the other, kinds of companies. Even if you share the vulnerabilities online, they usually don't care. And so, because, and the issue is that because there have been no regulations, I mean, sometimes I say we as a people, when we go in the street, there are different regulations, rules we should follow, but everybody can connect a device to the internet, everybody can produce a device without, following any specific regulations in terms of security. So as long as they are like that, in my opinion, you shouldn't use them. Even if you see me, I try not to use anything, especially a cell phone, because I don't trust them. As a cybersecurity expert, I have seen lots of issues in these kinds of stuff. And of course, another thing is that for the user to complain to manufacturers, how many of you as an end user complain to the manufacturers whenever you see a vulnerability there, whenever you see a vulnerability even publicly is published on the internet in the news and you've seen them? Did you call the manufacturers and complain and say, okay, you're responsible for that? Because we have been in contact with them and said, we haven't received anything from the users about it. So just...
So the problem is that with IoT, we have several operational actors. We have the user, the buyer, we have the manufacturer. Those are probably the most obvious one. But you also have entities that gathers and process the data that those devices provide. But in between, you have the communication provider that exchanges the information between the different entities. So each has different objectives, each has different risks and risk approaches. And the question to be asked is, who is the weakest element with regards to risk, and how can we manage to gather all the risk assessments to provide one idea for complete risk treatment of the problematic?
Well, in my opinion, the weakest link, because as you mentioned, there are different stakeholders. There are manufacturers who produce the device. They are, service providers. They are, the other kinds of controllers. There are cloud companies, but not based on my own opinion, but for example, based on the SANS IIoT security report, the most vulnerable aspects of IIoT infrastructures are devices and their firmware. Who is producing the devices? The manufacturer. So, yeah, I mean, even whether in your home or in your organization, you should definitely first pay attention to the most riskiest asset, which are the devices.
From my point of view, it's the user, because I think the user is probably not able to understand all of them. And the next
I think
one,
that we need to close, right? So
okay.
Please, no, finish your thought,
Okay.
right?
And the next one, it's only your example regarding Alexa or what else. I think that it's also an issue which we mentioned artificial intelligence behind, and the only solution from my point right now, it's awareness. You have to be aware that there could something happen, and of course we have links to GDPR, everything, but right now I would like to say to be aware about them.
My last final statement.
Short, Holger.
Short. How many of you have used Google Maps to find this place? Okay. Even me, as information security alien, I used it. So it's always, and really always, convenience versus security.
Okay, I think, Joe, yours is the last closing argument. Keep it short, please, and then I'm gonna kick it out, right?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I completely agree on the awareness front, education. IoT and technology, it's here to stay. And I think the initiatives that it brings to our society are fantastic for assisted living, vulnerable individuals, medical initiatives. There are so many great things that it brings to us. The key thing is we have to take responsibility ourselves to educate. Society's changing, it's not going anywhere. We have to learn, we have to understand the implications of bringing Alexa into our home. That's for you to go and research and to understand the importance of setting complex passwords, utilising a password manager to protect yourself, to understand the risk, because this technology is coming. Embrace the technology, understand the risk it presents, and mitigate it in a way that makes you feel comfortable, and understand that when it does go wrong, what would you do?
Okay, that makes my statement the last one. I'm going to kick it out. Okay, what I would like to offer you is basically an idea that risk management is playing around, especially ISACA. Risk management is not about mitigation of risk per se, right? It is about management of risk. So with all of these things, all of these technologies, we should consider the risk as opposed to the value created from use of that thing, right? Now, to say I don't trust them and therefore I don't use them, right? That it might basically kill value opportunities, yeah? Still, right, that if you don't trust them and you don't know, right, risk management is about being aware of what's happening, right? So you need to know about these risks. As long as we don't know, don't understand, then we cannot accept, well, we can't accept it. So the whole concept I would propose is get on top of risk management. We've seen it stated a number of times. At the moment, right, the legislation and the industry is wreaking havoc. So what I would propose is that we need to do more like pharmacy, make sure that the manufacturers have a duty to care, to do some testing, to do some really risk management, all right? And then we know what the remaining risks are, and then we can decide, okay, do I accept this because I like Alexa so much? And yes, it might be hackable. And yes, my son might say, somebody might call out from beyond the front door. That's the example somebody yesterday made. An Alexa connected to the digital lock. Somebody from the outside shouting, "Open the door." Alexa picking up on it. Yeah, that's a risk, and it will be a risk, and it's a new risk, right? And it is coming our way. Same as the self-driving car. We can hide, but they're there, and the value of these things is such that we might also need to think about mitigating the risk.
Yeah, actually, I have a question.
There you go. That's what she tried to do yesterday, right?
Yeah, I have a question for you. I just want to ask what opportunities I lose whenever I don't use Alexa or, I don't know, a wearable device or the other thing. I don't use them and I have a great life.
But that's
Called risk avoidance.
But Sarah, that's your choice, right? You don't perceive value in the
No, my
use of
question
Alexa.
is regarding the opportunities I lose by not using them. So what are those
You
opportunities?
might not perceive any opportunities to do. Yeah, but that was what people said when the mobile phone came out, right? Why can't I just use the normal phone?
So-
We're now 30 years later, I never, ever call anybody on the landline anymore, right? Yeah. Initially, a lot of friends like, why would I need a mobile phone? Yeah, there's a phone booth every 100 meters, right? Time will go on. Right? And shying away from these new inventions really won't help us.
I can answer it.
I just want to answer, perhaps, I apologise, I'm addressing your point about what are you missing. One of the reasons for us considering the technology angle was not because we necessarily wanted to go digital, but because we actually found that with house alarms going off, nobody was paying attention. So actually, it became outdated. People were not responding. So that's a reason for looking at an alternative.
Yeah, but sometimes you need to also take a look at the risks. Sometimes the risks are much more than the value you get out of it.
I've been overlooking one of our guests for a long time, right? And so he's going to get a closing argument.
Well, maybe it is a closing argument. Well, the fact is, the answer to a lot of these discussions is keep it simple. And I heard the answers several times. One is the fact that we don't need to change, the fact that we need to use, regardless if you're using OT or IT, you don't need to change the fact that we need to base it on a risk-based approach. That fact does not need to change. Now, how do you handle that is what needs to change, and that takes care of the aspects that she was talking about, is that they're totally different worlds. The fact that OT was a closed, air-gapped, gave us that sense of security. And now that we have to connect it to the internet is causing us to have these discussions. Yeah. Therefore, going back to the first question, which is what is IoT? Okay? Is it IT/OT, and then you combined it, and then you went it further and you connected it to the internet, therefore you're now calling it the Internet of Things? If that's the case, then really it's still the same in the fact that I need to address it, but I have to have a different mindset for the different technologies that I'm dealing with. In the IT world, I did it fine, and I handled it because we've been doing it for a long, long time. When I now move to the OT, which is a new frontier for me, I just have to look at it differently, which is what I've heard several times, and then I continue with the same approach I've been using it. So again, I believe, keep it simple.
Great, you just described what I'm doing with my customer. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I hope that, as I promised you, we did not give one single clear answer, right? It all depends. That's why we're consultants, right? You pay us so that we come in and figure it out on your behalf. That's what we do in life, right? So we don't give easy answers.
Thank you very much.
I do hope that we gave you some food for thought. If you want to talk to any of us, right, we will be around for the time to be. And thank you very much.